Hello children, I hope that you all are doing well. I welcome you all to our special English hour. Here we learn lots of new things, and while learning these things, we also have fun. Are you ready for some fun? Let's get started. Children, as you all know, we always start our day with something fun and interesting. So today, I have an activity for you. Are you ready for this activity? Let's go. Now, for this activity, you will see a few images on the screen. Each image will stay on the screen for a while, and you have to look at the image and guess what is the profession of the people that you see in these pictures. Sounds easy? Let's give it a try. Were you able to guess who was in the first picture? Yes, it was a teacher. As you all know, teachers play a very important role in the society. They teach students who later become something good in life. All our credit for what we are today must go to our teachers. Teachers not only teach in schools but also in colleges and universities, which is why teachers are very important part of our society. Now, let's have a look at the second image. Alright, were you able to guess who was in the second image? Yes, it was a doctor. As you all know, doctors treat patients. They make sure that they are able to cure them. There are different types of doctors who specialize in different fields. Now, let's have a look at the next image. Okay, were you able to guess who was in this image? Yes, it was an engineer. Now, can you tell me what does an engineer do? An engineer is someone who builds things. Now, let's have a look at the next image. Alright, were you able to guess who was in this image? Yes, it was a lawyer. Do you know what does a lawyer do? A lawyer is the officer of the court. When there is a dispute, the lawyer tries to win the case for the person. For example, if there is a dispute between me and another person over property, I will go to the lawyer who has studied all the laws. Now he will try to win the case for me. So that is the role of a lawyer, to get justice. Now let's move to the next image. Alright, were you able to guess who was in this picture? Yes, it was a shopkeeper. A shopkeeper is someone who runs any shop. It could be any shop, like a general store, or a clothes store, or a store of jewelry. So that is the work of a shopkeeper, which is to keep running the shop. Now let's have a look at the next picture. Now, children, can you tell me what did you see in this picture? Was it a bit confusing? You saw a lady in this picture who was working. Who do you think she was? She was a housewife. Now, children, you saw many pictures before this one. Can you tell me what was the difference? All the people in the previous pictures were someone who got paid for their work. They even get holidays. But a housewife is someone who works throughout the year. She doesn't get holidays or doesn't get paid. But that doesn't mean that housewife is not an occupation. So, what you just saw was a housewife. Now, let's have a look at the next picture. Alright, were you able to guess who was in this image? Yes, it was a farmer. We all know that farmer is the backbone of our economy. If there is no farmer, then probably we won't survive. He works very hard throughout the year so that we can have food on our plates. Now, let's move to our next picture. Okay, were you able to guess who was in this picture? Yes, it was a driver. A driver is someone who drives any vehicle. Now, let's have a look at the next picture. Alright, were you able to guess who was in this picture? Yes, it was a policeman. A policeman is someone who maintains law and order in the society. He works with the government. Now, let's have a look at our next picture. Alright, were you able to guess who we saw in this image? Yes, it was a pilot. A pilot is someone who flies a plane. Now, let's have a look at the next picture. Alright, were you able to guess who we saw in this picture? Yes, it looked like it was a soldier. A soldier is someone who fights to protect our country. It is one of the most difficult and challenging jobs to do. but they do it and sometimes even sacrifice their lives to protect our nation. Children, what we just saw were pictures of different professionals. They are called professionals because they are very good in their respective fields. But one just doesn't become professional. It takes a lot of hard work, and one must always respect that. We saw that there are people from different fields and they do different kinds of jobs. What we need to keep in mind is we should always respect every kind of job, whether it is something that is very small or whether it is something that is very big. We must never differentiate between people based on what is the work that they do. Today, we will be reading a poem. This poem also has a similar message. It teaches us the amount of hard work it requires to get something good in life. Let's have a look. Children, as you all know, it is very important for all of us to learn new words. So now let's learn some new words. You will see these words in the poem when we read it. So I request you to please make a note of these words in your notebooks. Executioners. 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 The executioners were waiting for the last words of the prisoner. Magistrates. 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 There were many magistrates present in the court. Pillage. 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 In ancient times, thieves used to pillage villages. Surly. 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 He was a surly man. Venture. 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 The two friends started a business venture together. So children, today we learned 5 new words. Let's revise them. Executioners, magistrates, pillage, surly, and venture. I hope that you remember these words and I hope that you have made a note of these words in your notebooks. Please open page number 88 of your textbook. The name of the poem is The Bees and it's written by William Shakespeare. Now I will be reading the poem and I request you to point at the words as I read them. And if you don't have a textbook, listen to me carefully. So work the honeybees, creatures that by a rule in nature teach the art of order to a peopled kingdom. This poem is about honeybees. The poet says the honeybees teach us, that is humans, about the art of maintaining law and order. They teach a kingdom that is ruled by people how to maintain law and order in the society. They have a king and officers of sorts, where some, like magistrates, correct at home. Others, like merchants, venture trade abroad. Others, like soldiers, armed in their stings, make boot upon the summer's velvet buds, which pillage they with merry march, bringing home to the tent royal of their emperor. Children, if you remember correctly, in the first activity that we did today, we spoke about different types of professions. Today, anyone can become anything that they want to be. But in ancient times, this was not the case. For example, if I am a farmer, my son cannot become a doctor. He has to become a farmer because professions then were hereditary. But today, that is not the case. The poet is talking about the society. In ancient times, the society was designed in a way where the head of the society was the king. Below him came officers who were present in the king's court. Below these officers were merchants or the trading class, and below merchants were common people. The poet here is talking about how similar structure exists among the bees. The bees also have a king. The bees have a magistrate who makes sure that there is law and order amongst the bees. Next, there is a merchant. A merchant makes sure that trade is carried out abroad. The same is the case with the bee merchant. After that, there are soldier bees. Soldier bees defend and attack. The work of a soldier bee is to collect nectar and later deliver all of this to the king. They pillage for nectar, which means they loot, and whatever they loot is given to the king, who, busied in his majesty, surveys the singing masons building roofs of gold, the civil citizens kneading up the honey, the poor mechanic porters crowding in their heavy burdens at his narrow gate, the sad-eyed justice with his surly hum, delivering over to executors pale the lazy yawning drone. Here, the poet further talks about people in the society. He mentions the mason. A mason is someone who builds buildings. A mason bee builds the honeycomb and he builds the roof which is covered in gold, which means honey. The poet further talks about common people. The job of a common person is to knead the honey, which means mixing the honey. Now, children, I have a question for you. Today, if someone commits a crime, what happens to him? The police catch hold of him. Later, he is taken to the court and the court gives the verdict, right? So just like that, if someone in the bee kingdom does not work or makes a mistake, he is executed. And this person is someone who is lazy, because bees are known to be very, very hardworking. Children, the poem that we just read is written by William Shakespeare. He is known as the father of English language. This poem talks about the lives of bees. It tells us how similar it is to that of humans. They also have different bees assigned to do each function. The poet here is trying to say that the bees lead a very organized life, and he tells us that we as humans should learn something from the bees. I hope that you enjoyed this poem and you learned something new. Children, wasn't it an interesting poem? Now let's do an activity. Today we will be learning about two figures of speech. First, alliteration, and second, onomatopoeia. First, let's talk about alliteration. Alliteration is when a letter is repeated in a line or stanza. For example, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Can you tell me in this line which is the letter that is repeated? Yes, it is the letter P. So this is an example of alliteration. Now let's talk about onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is when there is a mention of a sound in a line or a stanza. For example, if the line says, "The wolves were howling," here howling is mentioned, which is a sound that the wolves make, which is why it is an example of onomatopoeia. Now, for the activity, you will see the poem on the screen. What you need to do is find out examples of alliteration and onomatopoeia from the poem. Sounds easy? You have 30 seconds for this activity and your time starts now. Children, were you able to solve this activity? Let's have a look. Let's look for stanzas with alliteration. Number 1. Which pillage they with merry march bring home? Here there is repetition of the sound of the letter M. Next, the civil citizens kneading up the honey. Here the sound of the letter C is repeated. Now let's have a look at an example of onomatopoeia. The line is, "The singing masons building roofs of gold." Here the word singing indicates sound, which is why it is an example of onomatopoeia. Children, I hope that you got all the answers correct. Children, I hope you had fun in today's session. And most importantly, I hope that you learned something new. On that note, I would like to take your leave. I will see you all in our next session. Until then, take care and stay safe. Bye bye.